The first thing I heard was the alarm. Sharp, frantic, screaming through the quiet street like it had something urgent to say. By the time I stepped outside, smoke was already curling up from the hood of the patrol car parked along the curb. Neighbors had gathered on their lawns, half curious, half stunned, watching the scene unfold like they'd just walked into the middle of a disaster they didn't understand yet. And standing right there beside the damaged vehicle was Karen. She looked proud, almost triumphant. Police cruisers rolled in fast, tires crunching against the pavement as officers stepped out and quickly moved toward her. One of them raised his voice, firm and controlled. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. You're under arrest." Karen actually laughed, not nervous laughter. The kind of laugh someone makes when they believe they're untouchable. "You can't arrest me," she said loudly, waving a dismissive hand. "This neighborhood is a no-cop zone. I'm the HOA president." In that moment, she had no idea the mistake she'd just made, but to understand how Karen destroyed a police patrol car and ruined her own life, we have to rewind a few weeks. A few weeks earlier, the neighborhood had seemed like the kind of place people move to when they're tired of chaos. Quiet streets, perfectly trimmed lawns, houses that all looked carefully maintained. Everything about it suggested order. The sidewalks were clean, the trees were evenly spaced, and every mailbox lined up like it had passed some kind of inspection. It felt predictable in the best way possible. That was exactly what I wanted. After years of unpredictable schedules and long shifts, the idea of living somewhere calm sounded almost luxurious. When I finished moving in, the first few days passed peacefully. Boxes got unpacked slowly, neighbors waved politely from a distance, and the rhythm of the street felt steady and uneventful. I never made a big announcement about what I did for a living. It usually comes out naturally anyway. After my shifts, I'd drive home in the marked patrol vehicle assigned to me, park along the curb in front of the house, and head inside. No lights flashing, no drama, just another car on the street. Still, the vehicle had a way of introducing me without a conversation. Sometimes I'd notice curtains move slightly when I pulled up. A few neighbors would pause mid-walk and glance toward the driveway before continuing on. Nothing hostile, just curiosity. People are noticing something different. For a while, that was the only reaction. Then Karen appeared. She walked up one afternoon with a bright smile that looked practiced, the kind people wear when they're used to being in charge of things. Her voice carried confidence as she introduced herself and proudly explained that she was the HOA president. While we talked, her eyes kept drifting toward the patrol vehicle. Not casually, carefully. It was the kind of glance someone makes when they're already deciding something. And in that moment, I realized the quiet neighborhood might not stay quiet for long. A few days after that conversation, I opened my front door and immediately noticed a bright orange paper taped right at eye level. It was impossible to miss. The bold letters across the top read HOA Zeolation Noticed, like a warning meant to embarrass whoever lived inside. I pulled it off the door and read through it slowly. According to Karen, the patrol vehicle parked outside my house was creating community discomfort. The notice claimed that visible law enforcement presence could lower property values and disturb the peaceful atmosphere the neighborhood was trying to maintain. She also wrote that HOA guidelines required something she called community neutrality, which apparently meant no symbols of authority that might make residents feel uneasy. I read the page twice. Then I opened the HOA bylaws I had signed when buying the house. The rule she quoted simply didn't exist. At first, I assumed it was some kind of misunderstanding. I sent a calm reply explaining that the vehicle was city property and that nothing in the HOA agreement restricted it. I even attached the relevant sections of the bylaws just to keep things clear and professional. That should have ended it. Instead, my inbox started filling up. Karen began sending long emails, copying the entire HOA board. In them, she claimed my patrol vehicle was intimidating neighbors. She suggested it created the feeling of government surveillance in what she called a private community environment. She even implied that my presence violated the neighborhood's values. Each message became more dramatic than the last. I kept responding the same way, calmly, politely, and with actual rules attached. But every time facts appeared in the conversation, Karen seemed to take it personally. And instead of backing down, she did something far more predictable. She escalated. The next HOA meeting made it clear Karen wasn't planning to drop the issue quietly. I attended mostly out of curiosity, sitting near the back while neighbors filled the folding chairs in the small clubhouse room. At first, the discussion followed the usual routine budget updates, lawn maintenance reminders, small complaints about parking. Then Karen stood up, and the tone shifted. She didn't mention my name. but everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. Her voice carried across the room as she launched into a speech about protecting the neighborhood. She claimed visible police presence attracted crime instead of preventing it. According to her, uniforms created tension, not safety. She repeated the phrase, "no cop zone," several times, saying the community deserved to remain neutral and free from outside authority. A few people nodded awkwardly. Others stared at the floor, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge her. I said nothing. Sometimes the fastest way to understand someone's intentions is to let them talk. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at my door. Inside was a formal demand from Karen, printed with HOA letterhead, stating that the patrol vehicle had to be removed within 72 hours or the association would take corrective action. That evening, I walked over to her house. I kept the conversation simple. I told her calmly that touching the vehicle would be a felony. It wasn't mine in the legal sense. It belonged to the city, and any damage to it would carry serious consequences. Karen didn't look concerned. She leaned against the doorframe with a small smirk and said, "HOA authority came before city authority inside the neighborhood." Then she added that she knew exactly how to handle problems when residents refused to cooperate. That sentence stayed with me. When I walked back home, I started documenting everything. Emails were saved, threats were archived. I recorded future meetings and adjusted my exterior cameras to cover the street, because something about Karen's confidence suggested she was moving past complaints, and reckless people rarely stop before they cross a line. That afternoon had started like any other long day winding down. After finishing an early shift, I drove back through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, parked the patrol vehicle along the curb in front of the house, and stepped inside. The air conditioning hummed softly, and the silence felt welcome after hours of noise and radio chatter. I kicked off my boots, dropped my keys on the counter, and sat down for a moment, letting the tension of the day drain away. For a few minutes, everything was calm. Then the windows rattled. Boom! The sound hit so hard it felt like the house itself had flinched. A split second later, the patrol car alarm erupted outside, shrill and relentless. My stomach dropped as I rushed toward the front door and stepped onto the porch. Smoke was already pouring from the hood of the patrol vehicle. Bright orange flames licked upward, twisting in the afternoon heat as neighbors began spilling out of their houses. Some stood frozen on their lawns while others pulled out their phones, trying to understand what they were watching. And right there, a few yards away, stood Karen. She had her phone raised, recording everything like she was documenting a victory. Her voice carried across the street as she shouted that the neighborhood had given warnings, that people had tried to be reasonable. Those rules existed for a reason. Then she laughed and called the burning car HOA enforcement. I didn't waste time arguing. I ran into the garage, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and rushed back toward the vehicle while pulling my phone from my pocket to call dispatch. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood turned into a storm of sirens. Police units arrived first, followed by firefighters sliding hoses across the pavement. Lights flashed across every house on the block. And through it all, Karen kept shouting that the HOA had the authority to do this. While more neighbors lifted their phones and recorded everything unfolding, once the flames were under control, the scene shifted from chaos to procedure. Yellow tape went up around the patrol vehicle while officers quietly began securing the area. The fire marshal crouched near the curb, studying the scorched metal and the pattern of damage spreading across the hood. He ran a gloved hand along the pavement, then looked toward the engine compartment again with a focused expression. A few minutes later, he stood and gave a small, confirming nod. Accelerant. That single word changed the atmosphere immediately. What had looked like reckless vandalism a few minutes earlier now carried the weight of something much more serious. Karen must have sensed the shift, too. Her voice, which had been loud and confident moments earlier, began to lose its certainty as investigators moved methodically around the vehicle. Then, one of the officers pointed toward the patrol car's dashboard camera. The system had been running the entire time. When the footage played back, everything unfolded with brutal clarity. Karen is walking toward the vehicle. Karen is pouring liquid across the hood. Karen raised her phone and loudly declared that the neighborhood was a no-cop zone. The recording didn't leave much room for interpretation. At that point, Karen's confidence collapsed completely. She pulled out her phone and began tapping frantically at the screen, trying to delete whatever she had recorded earlier. An officer noticed immediately. Within seconds, the device was taken from her hands and sealed as evidence. Meanwhile, neighbors who had stayed silent before suddenly started speaking. One by one, They told investigators about the emails, the threats, the speeches at HOA meetings, and the certified letter demanding the car be removed. For the first time since this started, Karen looked around and realized something important. She wasn't controlling the situation anymore. She was standing in the middle of a felony investigation. The legal consequences moved faster than Karen probably expected. Once the investigation was wrapped up, the charges were filed with very little room for argument. Arson of a government vehicle, destruction of public property, reckless endangerment, obstruction of justice for attempting to erase evidence. Each charge carried weight on its own, but together they painted a picture the court couldn't ignore. The HOA board reacted almost immediately. Emails went out claiming Karen had acted independently and without authorization. Within days, several board members quietly resigned, eager to distance themselves from the chaos she had created. When the case reached court, the evidence spoke louder than anyone in the room. The dash camera footage played clearly, showing Karen approaching the patrol car, pouring liquid across the hood, and proudly declaring the neighborhood a no-cop zone. Investigators presented the emails and certified letters she had sent, each one proving she had planned to force the vehicle out of the community. Neighbors testified about the threats and the speeches at HOA meetings. By the time the judge delivered the verdict, there was no suspense left. Karen was sentenced to several years in prison in order to pay full restitution for the destroyed patrol vehicle and emergency response costs. A lien was placed on her home to guarantee repayment, and she was permanently banned from holding any leadership role in any homeowners association again. For the neighborhood, the atmosphere changed almost overnight. The tension that had quietly hung over the streets for years finally lifted. Karen wanted a neighborhood with no cops. Now she's living somewhere full of them. Looking back at everything that happened, the question still lingers in the air. Did Karen truly believe the rules she created were stricter than the law itself? Or did power simply convince her that consequences didn't apply to her anymore? Moments like this make you wonder where the line should be when it comes to HOA authority. Should neighborhood boards really have that much control over people's lives? Now, I'm curious what you think. Did Karen get the punishment she deserved? Or did things go too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and tell me where you're watching this story from. And if you enjoy HOA drama like this, don't forget to subscribe for more stories.